Tonight we meet the woman who turned silence into strategy and grief into power, Hypatia of Alexandria. Before you settle in, yes, turn off your phone. Yes, maybe light a candle. No, you don't need to be religious, but you do need to believe that knowledge can be sacred. Because Hypatia didn't just study the stars, she conversed with them. Born around 350 AD in the greatest city of the ancient world, Alexandria, Hypatia was raised not in a temple, but in a library. Her father, Theon, wasn't just a mathematician. He was the last librarian of the great library's surviving soul, a man who taught his daughter not to memorize Euclid, but to question him. What if the circle isn't perfect? He'd ask, what if the point has weight? And Hypatia? She didn't answer. She calculated. While other girls were taught to sew, to smile, to be quiet, Hypatia learned to measure the precession of the equinoxes, to chart the orbits of planets using nothing but a gnomon, a sundial, and an unshakable mind. She didn't just understand math. She saw it as poetry written in the language of the universe, and she spoke it fluently. Imagine her, a woman in a simple woolen tunic, standing atop the steps of the Serapeum, lecturing to crowds of men, senators, soldiers, merchants, philosophers, all leaning forward, hanging on every word. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because her voice carried the weight of truth. She didn't preach. She proved. She didn't believe in gods who demanded sacrifice. She believed in numbers that demanded precision, and that made her dangerous. Rome was crumbling. Christianity was rising. The old gods were being torn down brick by brick and replaced with the certainty of dogma. And Hypatia? She was the last living echo of the old world, rational, curious, unafraid. She didn't convert. She didn't hide. She taught to pagans, to Christians, to Jews, to anyone who showed up with a question. Her students didn't come for miracles. They came for clarity. She built astrolabes, instruments that could tell you where the stars would be tonight, and planetary models that moved with the grace of clockwork. She wrote commentaries on Diophantus that would later become the foundation of algebra. She refined the water clock so accurately it could measure the time between heartbeats. And yet, she never published under her own name. Not out of fear, out of principle. She didn't want to be Hypatia, the woman scientist. She wanted to be Hypatia, the thinker. And that, in a world increasingly ruled by labels, was her greatest rebellion. But silence doesn't protect you forever. The city grew louder. Riots broke out. A bishop named Cyril, brilliant, pious, and terrifyingly certain, began painting her not as a scholar, but as a witch, a sorceress who bewitched men with her mind, who whispered equations instead of prayers, who refused to kneel. They didn't accuse her of heresy. They accused her of influence. And in Alexandria, in that moment, influence was the deadliest sin. One spring morning in 415 AD, she was dragged from her chariot by a mob of monks and lay people, men who believed truth was a book, not a theorem. They tore her clothes off. They scraped her skin with oyster shells. They broke her bones, and then they burned her, not in a public square, not for spectacle, but in silence, because the truth they feared was louder than any fire. Her body was never recovered, her books destroyed, her instruments smashed, her name erased. For centuries, she was remembered only as a footnote, a tragic martyr, a symbol of lost wisdom. But here's the quiet miracle. Every time a child asks, "Why does the moon look bigger when it's low?" Every time a student solves an equation and feels the universe whisper back. Every time a woman stands before a classroom of men and says, "Let me show you how it works," Hypatia is still there. Not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as a method. She didn't die because she was too smart. She died because the world wasn't ready to be taught. She didn't just calculate the motion of stars. She calculated the cost of curiosity, and she paid it in full. So tonight, as you drift off, ask yourself, what truth are you afraid to speak? What equation are you afraid to solve? Because Hypatia didn't just die for knowledge. She died so you could ask. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing of all.